The air felt different before anything else did. The evening light outside the windows looked softer than it should, like it had been brushed thin across the city. Inside the quiet apartment, the usual sounds seemed to hold their breath. Even the low hum of the street felt far away. Something small shifted in Keanu, not fear, not excitement, just a gentle pressure in his chest that did not have a clear name. He stood still for a moment, listening to the silence as if it carried a message that had been waiting for him. Alexandra noticed it without asking. She had learned the shape of his quiet moods the way someone learns the rhythm of rain on a roof. She saw how his eyes moved toward the corner of the room where a simple paper bag rested on a chair, and how his shoulders lifted then eased, like he was deciding whether to say something. He was calm, but there was a thin strand of tension under the calm, the kind that comes when a person remembers something important and is not sure they are ready to touch it. She felt her own breath slow down, like her body understood that the night was about to become something more than a normal night. Keanu had said it was just an ordinary evening, a walk, a small bite to eat, maybe a quiet stop somewhere that did not need a reason. But there was a reason, and Alexandra could sense it in the way he kept checking the time without looking like he was checking the time. She did not push. She believed in space, in soft trust, in letting a person open a door in their own way. She only moved closer, close enough to share the same pocket of warmth, close enough to say without words that she was there. They had both learned in different ways that public life could make simple things feel complicated. The world watched them as if their quiet moments belonged to everyone. But tonight had a different kind of quiet. There were no phones on the table, no plans written down, no assistants calling. There was only the slow shift of evening, the faint smell of tea from earlier, and a small folded note that Keanu had placed in the paper bag like it was something fragile. Keanu finally spoke, and his voice was low, steady, careful. He said he wanted to take a walk before it got too late. He said he wanted to show her a place that mattered to him, not because it was famous, but because it held a memory he had never fully returned to. He did not call it a mystery, but it sounded like one. Alexandra nodded, and she let the moment be simple, even though her heart leaned forward with curiosity. Outside, the city was alive in a soft way. Streetlights came on one by one, not bright, just enough to draw thin lines across the sidewalk. The air carried the smell of food from a small corner place and the distant sound of people talking, laughing, living their own nights. Keanu walked beside Alexandra at an unhurried pace. He kept his hands relaxed, but his fingers sometimes pressed lightly against his palm, like he was holding onto an invisible thread. They moved through streets that were familiar, then turned into a quieter area where the buildings looked older and the trees seemed to stand closer together. Alexandra watched the way Keanu looked at the corners, the signs, the small details that most people did not see. It was not the gaze of a tourist. It was the gaze of someone reading an old page in a book, trying to remember the exact line that once changed everything. Alexandra asked him softly what the place was. She kept her words gentle, not demanding, not sharp. Keanu answered in pieces like he was taking care not to break the memory. He said it was a community center. He said it was small and it was not always open. He said he had been there a long time ago on a night when he felt tired in a way sleep could not fix. He paused after that, and the pause felt like a doorway. The goal of the walk became clear, even if the details were still hidden. Keanu was not going there for attention. He was going there to return something, or to find something, or maybe both. Alexandra felt a warm respect rise in her because she knew he did not treat kindness like a performance. He treated it like a private promise, something you keep even when nobody is watching. As they got closer, the street grew quieter. There were fewer cars, fewer voices. A cool breeze moved through the leaves above them, and the sound was like soft paper folding. Keanu slowed without meaning to, his eyes fixed on a building ahead, plain and modest, with a sign that was hard to read in the dim light. The windows were dark. The door looked closed. The place seemed asleep. Alexandra felt a small confusion. If it was closed, why come now? She did not say it yet. She watched Keanu step closer to the front, then stop. His face stayed calm, but something in his expression shifted like a memory had reached out and touched him. He looked at the door, then at the windows, then at the ground near the entrance, as if he expected to see a certain mark, a certain scratch, a certain sign that time had not erased. The rising conflict started in a quiet way. It was not danger, but it was a tension between what Keanu hoped for and what the night seemed to offer. The building was dark and the street was empty, and the moment felt like it could end right there, unfinished. Keanu reached into his pocket and pulled out a small card. He stared at it, and Alexandra realized it was not new. It was worn like it had been carried for years. Keanu told her in a voice that barely rose above the wind that he had promised himself he would come back. He had promised himself he would find one person, a stranger who had helped him when nobody else knew he needed help. He said it was not dramatic. He said it was simple. He had been sitting outside this building years ago, tired and quietly lost, and a person had walked out, noticed him, and offered him something warm. A drink, a seat, a few words, and a look that said you matter even if you are quiet. Alexandra felt her eyes soften. She knew how a small kindness could save a person in ways the world never sees. She also knew how hard it could be to repay it, because life moves, people move, and the moment becomes a story you tell yourself when you need faith in humanity. She asked him what the person looked like. Keanu shook his head slowly. He said he remembered the feeling more than the face. He remembered the voice, calm and respectful. He remembered a name tag, maybe, and the scent of clean soap, and the way the person did not ask for anything in return. Keanu held the paper bag tighter now. Alexandra could see the edge of something inside, maybe a book, maybe a small envelope. She did not ask. She could feel that Keanu wanted to do this in the right way, not a big way. He wanted to offer thanks without making the other person feel small. He wanted respect to lead the moment. Then the twist came, quiet but sharp. From inside the dark building, a faint light moved across a hallway window, like someone had turned on a small lamp for a second. Keanu froze. Alexandra looked up, and her breath caught because the building was not as asleep as it seemed. A sound followed, subtle, like a chair shifting, like a door opening softly. It was not loud, but it was real. Keanu stepped back a half step, not afraid, just startled by the possibility that the past was about to answer him. He looked at Alexandra, and for the first time that night, his eyes showed something unguarded. Hope mixed with uncertainty. He whispered that the place should be closed. He whispered that he checked earlier. But now there was light, and now there was movement, and now the night had turned in a direction he did not plan. Alexandra did not rush him. She placed her hand lightly near his arm, not gripping, just steadying, offering calm. She said maybe someone was there cleaning. Maybe someone had a key. Maybe the world had its own timing. Her voice was warm, grounded. It carried the kind of faith that does not demand proof. Keanu walked closer again, carefully, respectfully. He did not knock right away. He waited, listening, letting the moment settle. His shoulders relaxed a little, as if he remembered that kindness begins with patience. The light inside moved again, and this time it stayed. A narrow strip of brightness appeared near the door frame, like the door was not fully shut. Keanu looked at the paper bag, then at Alexandra. He said he did not want to intrude. He said he only wanted to leave something, a thank you, a small support for the center, something that could help the next person who sits outside feeling invisible. Alexandra nodded. She said they could leave it quietly, no names, no attention. She said kindness does not need a spotlight to be real. Keanu took a slow breath, and for a moment the tension in his chest softened. The emotional beat arrived like a warm hand on the heart. He smiled, small and genuine. He said that was why he brought her, because she always helped him choose the kind path, not the loud path. He said she made him feel brave in a gentle way. Alexandra felt something bloom in her chest, a quiet pride and a quiet tenderness, because respect between two people can be a shelter. He reached toward the door, not pushing it, just touching the edge. The door gave slightly, opening a little more than it should. A soft sound came from inside, like a step on old wood. Keanu and Alexandra both went still. Their eyes met again, and the air felt charged with a question that neither of them needed to speak. Someone was inside, and they were close. The thin line of light at the door did not feel like danger, but it did feel like a secret that had been kept too long. Keanu held his breath for a moment, not because he was scared, but because he did not want to break the quiet. Alexandra felt the same careful stillness in her body, like the night was asking them to move slowly and listen first. The street behind them stayed calm, and the trees barely moved, yet everything inside Keanu felt awake. A soft step sounded again, closer this time. Keanu pulled his hand back from the door and stood with open posture, respectful, not trying to hide, not trying to push his way in. Alexandra stayed close, her presence steady and warm, like a hand placed gently on a shoulder without touching. Keanu cleared his throat quietly, then spoke with a simple kindness that did not demand anything. He said hello, he said sorry to disturb, he said they only wanted to leave something for the center. For a few seconds, nothing answered. Then a voice came from inside, low and careful. It did not sound alarmed, but it did sound unsure, like someone who had learned to be cautious after many long shifts and many odd nights. The voice asked who it was. Keanu gave only his first name, calm and plain, like he was just another person standing in the evening air. He said he came by to drop off a small bag, and he did not need anything in return. He said he would leave it at the door and go. The door opened a little more, just enough for a face to appear in the gap. A person stood there with a soft lamp behind them, making their features hard to read. They wore a simple sweater and had a key ring clipped to a belt loop. Their eyes moved quickly, first to Alexandra, then to Keanu, then to the bag. Keanu kept his hands visible and relaxed. The person did not smile, but their expression softened slightly, like the tone of Keanu's voice had lowered the tension. They introduced themselves as Myra, a volunteer who sometimes checked the building after hours. Myra explained that a storage closet had been left unlocked, and she did not want the place to be at risk. It was a practical reason, simple and real. Keanu nodded, grateful for that normal detail because it made the moment feel human. Alexandra thanked Myra for taking care of the place, and her words were honest, not polite for show. Keanu held the paper bag out, not pushing it into the doorway, just offering it in a way that gave Myra choice. He said it was for the center, for whoever needed it, supplies, gift cards, a note, nothing dramatic. Myra hesitated, then opened the door a little more. The light spilled onto the sidewalk, warming the edges of their shoes and the bottom of the bag. Myra took the bag carefully, like it carried something delicate. Myra asked why. The question was simple, but it landed heavy. Keanu did not answer right away. He looked at the dark windows, the quiet sign, the plain doorway, as if he was listening to his own memory before speaking it out loud. He said that years ago he had been here on a hard night. He said someone from the center noticed him sitting outside, offered him water, offered him a place to breathe, and treated him like a person, not like a problem. He said he never forgot that kind moment. He said he promised himself he would return the kindness when he could. Myra's eyes narrowed, not with suspicion, but with focus, like she was turning over a memory of her own. She asked when it happened. Keanu answered with a time that sounded like a long distance, not a date spoken for drama. He said it was many years ago, late autumn, the air cold, his thoughts loud, his body tired. He said he did not even know the person's name. He only remembered a name tag and a gentle voice. Myra stepped back into the doorway and lifted the lamp a little, letting the light fall across her face. She looked young enough to not have been there then. She looked kind, but not sentimental. She said she was not sure who it could have been. She said the center had seen many volunteers come and go. She said some of the old staff still lived nearby, some had moved, some had passed away. She said the records were not always clear. Keanu felt the night tilt. The goal of the walk had been simple, a return, a quiet thank you. But now it was turning into a search, and the search carried uncertainty. If he could not find the person, what did the promise mean? If the center itself could not remember, would the moment be lost to time? Alexandra watched his face and saw the small shift in his jaw, the way he swallowed, the way he kept his calm but held a new weight inside it. Myra glanced down at the bag, then back at Keanu. She said she appreciated it, but she also said something that surprised them. She said they had received small anonymous gifts before, and sometimes it helped, but sometimes it created problems. She explained that a few months ago someone left an envelope that looked generous, but it came with expectations and questions and pressure. The center had to be careful because their work depended on trust. Myra's voice stayed respectful, not accusing, just honest. Keanu felt a sting of disappointment, not at Myra, but at the reality that even kindness could be complicated when the world had been unkind too often. He nodded slowly. He said he understood. He said he did not want to add stress. He said he could take the bag back if needed. He said he only wanted to support the place quietly. Alexandra stepped forward, her voice soft and steady. She said they respected the center's boundaries. She said they would not ask for credit or access or publicity. She said they would do whatever made the center feel safe. Myra looked at Alexandra and seemed to believe her. The tension in the doorway loosened a little, like a knot that had been held tight for too long. Then another sound came from deeper inside the building, a faint cough. It was not loud, but it was close enough to make Myra turn her head quickly. The lamp light shook slightly, and for a moment the hallway behind Myra showed a second figure, blurred, standing still. Keanu's heart jumped, not from fear, but from recognition he could not explain. Something about that posture, the way the figure stood, pulled at his memory like a thread he had kept wrapped around his finger for years. Myra shifted her body as if to block the view, not aggressively, but protective, like she was guarding someone's privacy. She called a name softly, telling the person inside that everything was fine. The second figure did not step forward. They stayed back, half hidden, as if they were deciding whether to be seen. Keanu did not push. He did not ask to come in. He stood still and let respect lead again. He spoke toward the hallway, not loud, not dramatic. He said he was sorry to disturb. He said he would leave. He said he was grateful for the work they did. He said thank you. It was the kind of thank you that carried more than manners. It carried history. The second figure moved slightly, just enough for Keanu to see a hand lift and rest on the wall. A bracelet caught the light, a simple band, worn, familiar. Keanu's breath caught, and his mind flashed with an image from that old night, a hand offering a cup of water, the same kind of bracelet glinting under a street lamp. He felt his chest tighten with a strange hope, so sudden it almost hurt. Myra noticed Keanu's reaction. Her eyes followed his gaze. She looked back toward the hallway, then back to him, and her face changed in a way that suggested she understood something she had not expected to understand. She lowered her voice and asked Keanu a careful question. She asked if the person who helped him that night had a certain way of speaking, slow and gentle, like they were choosing each word with respect. Keanu nodded, surprised. He said yes, that was exactly it. He said the person did not rush, did not pry, did not ask for details. They only offered warmth and dignity. Myra's expression turned thoughtful. She said there was someone like that. She said there was an older volunteer who still came by sometimes, not a staff, just to quietly help with small tasks, especially after hours. She said the person did not like attention. Keanu felt the suspense sharpen. He asked softly if that person was here now. Myra did not answer right away. She looked down the hallway again, then took a slow breath. She said yes, the person was here, but she also said something that made the moment heavier. She said the person had been through a lot recently. She said they were tired and private and had their own reasons for staying in the background. She said she did not want to disturb them for something that might be a misunderstanding. Alexandra stepped in with gentle humility. She said they did not want to disturb anyone. She said they could leave without meeting. She said the gift was not a trade for a conversation. Keanu listened, grateful for her steadiness. He looked toward the hallway and his eyes softened, not demanding, not reaching. He simply stood there with quiet gratitude, like someone offering a door instead of forcing it open. The second figure in the hallway shifted again. This time they took one small step forward into the faint edge of light. Their face was still not clear, but their presence was. They stood with calm patience, and even from a distance, Keanu felt the same kind of safety he had felt years ago. It was like a song you recognize in the first note. Myra turned fully toward them and spoke quietly, asking if they were comfortable coming closer. The older volunteer did not answer with words at first. They nodded once, slow, as if saying yes, but only on their own terms. Keanu's throat tightened. He did not move because he did not want to overwhelm the moment. Alexandra kept her posture open and kind, giving space for whatever needed to happen. The older volunteer finally spoke from the hallway, their voice soft, calm, and steady. They said, "You came back." The words were simple, but they carried a depth that made Keanu's eyes sting. He felt a wave of emotion rise, gratitude, relief, and a quiet disbelief. He had not even said what he hoped for, and yet the night was answering him. Keanu whispered, "I did." And then he paused because he realized that this was not only about his memory. It was about the other person's life, their privacy, their dignity. It was about returning kindness without turning it into a story for the world. He looked at the bag in Myra's hands, and he suddenly understood that the real gift might not be what was inside it. Myra took a step back, creating space between the doorway and the hallway, like she was making room for a moment that deserved respect. The older volunteer moved closer, still partly in shadow, and Keanu could finally see the bracelet clearly, the same worn band, the same simple shine. Keanu felt his heart settle into a truth he could not deny. But just as the moment began to open, a phone rang inside the building, sharp and unexpected. Myra flinched and turned her head toward a small office. The older volunteer froze. The calm broke for a second, and the older volunteer's eyes showed worry, like the sound had pulled them back into a problem they were trying to carry alone. Myra's face tightened with concern. Keanu saw it and felt a new tension rise, not about his past, but about something happening right now. Something was wrong inside the center, something that had nothing to do with him, and yet he was standing at the doorway at the exact moment it surfaced. Myra answered the phone quickly, her voice low. She listened, and her expression changed from cautious to alarmed, then to focused. She covered the receiver and looked at Keanu and Alexandra. She said there was an issue, a missing envelope from their donation box, and someone had reported seeing a car outside earlier. She said they were not accusing anyone, but the timing was bad, and she did not know what to do. Keanu felt the weight of the night shift again. Kindness had brought him here, but now kindness might be tested. Alexandra's hand moved closer to his arm, steady and calm. Keanu looked at Myra with respect and said, "Tell me what you need. We will help in any way that makes you feel safe." The phone went quiet, but the tension it left behind stayed in the air like a held breath. Keanu felt it settle in his chest, not sharp but heavy, the kind of weight that asks a person who they want to be next. The hallway light flickered slightly, and for a moment the building felt older, like it was remembering all the nights it had held worry and hope at the same time. Alexandra stood steady beside him, her presence calm, her silence supportive. Myra lowered the phone slowly. She did not rush to explain, and that restraint made the moment feel more serious. She said there had been an envelope in the donation box earlier that evening. She said it was not a large amount, but it mattered because it was meant for emergency supplies. She said someone from a nearby shop had mentioned a car idling too long, and now the envelope was gone. Her voice stayed professional, but the edges of concern were clear. Keanu listened without interrupting. He did not step forward to fix things. He did not offer money or answers. He knew that doing the right thing sometimes meant waiting before acting. He asked one careful question. He asked if anyone inside the center felt unsafe. Myra shook her head. She said no one was hurt, but trust felt shaken. She said trust was harder to replace than money. The older volunteer stood a little closer now, still half in shadow. Their face showed tired kindness, the kind that comes from years of giving without applause. They said nothing at first, but their eyes moved between Myra and Keanu, as if weighing the situation quietly. When they spoke, their voice was calm and low. They said the envelope had been there when they arrived earlier. They said they remembered because they had checked the box as part of habit, not suspicion, just care. Alexandra felt the shift. The story of the evening was no longer only about returning kindness from the past. It was now about protecting kindness in the present. She could see it in Keanu's posture, how his shoulders squared gently, not defensively, but responsibly. He was not here as a guest anymore. He was here as someone who understood what it meant when small places carried big hopes. Keanu asked if there were cameras. Myra nodded and said yes, but they were old and sometimes slow. She said the footage had not been checked yet because she wanted to avoid jumping to conclusions. The older volunteer nodded in agreement. They said assumptions could hurt people more than truth if handled poorly. Keanu respected that. He said he would not want anyone blamed without clarity. A quiet moment passed. Outside, a car drove by, its headlights briefly washing over the doorway. The older volunteer flinched at the sound, then steadied themselves. Keanu noticed. He remembered that same flinch from years ago, the way exhaustion made every unexpected noise feel louder. The recognition deepened something inside him. This person had carried many nights like this. Keanu offered something simple. He said he could stay and help look quietly, respectfully. He said not as an outsider, but as someone who cared about the place. Myra hesitated, then nodded slowly. She said extra eyes could help as long as it stayed calm. Alexandra offered to help too, but Keanu glanced at her gently. He said it might be better if one of them stayed near the door, just in case someone came back. Alexandra agreed. She understood his instinct to protect the space. Myra led Keanu and the older volunteer inside. The building smelled faintly of old books and cleaning solution. The hallway lights buzzed softly. Keanu walked carefully, noticing details he had not seen from outside: a bulletin board with faded flyers, a stack of folded chairs, a handwritten thank you note taped crookedly to a wall. It felt like a place built on small efforts, repeated every day. They stopped near a small office where the donation box sat on a low shelf. The lid was open. The box itself was not damaged. It looked untouched except for the missing envelope. The older volunteer crouched slightly to look closer. They pointed out that the box was easy to open if someone knew how. It did not require force, only familiarity. That detail settled uneasily in the room. Myra frowned. She said only a few people knew the box well. Staff, long-term volunteers, maybe one or two community members who helped often. The words hung in the air, not accusing but heavy with implication. Keanu felt the suspense tighten. This was not a simple outside theft. It felt closer, more complicated. Keanu suggested checking the footage, not to judge, but to understand the timing. Myra nodded and moved to the computer. The screen flickered on, casting pale light across her face. The older volunteer stood back, arms folded loosely, eyes lowered. Keanu watched them carefully, not suspiciously, but attentively. He was learning to read the room without pushing it. The footage played slowly. The angle showed the front area, the donation box just at the edge of the frame. Time stamps moved forward in quiet jumps. Myra leaned closer. Keanu stood slightly behind her. The older volunteer stayed still. Then the screen showed someone entering earlier, someone familiar to the building. Keanu could not see the face clearly, only a shape, a posture. The person moved naturally, like they belonged there. Myra paused the footage, her breath caught. She recognized the figure. She whispered a name, barely audible. It was not the older volunteer. It was someone else, someone trusted, someone who helped often. Keanu felt a wave of relief and sadness mixed together. Relief that the older volunteer was not immediately suspected. Sadness that trust had still been broken. But the footage did not end there. The screen showed the person hesitating near the box. Their hand hovered. Then they looked toward the door as if listening. Then the footage glitched. The image froze, then jumped forward. The moment of truth was missing. Myra cursed softly under her breath, then stopped herself. She apologized. The older volunteer sighed quietly. They said old systems failed at the worst times. Keanu felt frustration rise, but he kept his voice steady. He said glitches did not erase truth, they only delayed it. The older volunteer finally spoke more fully. They said the person on the screen had been struggling. They said they had noticed signs, tired eyes, distracted hands, worry that did not leave. They said sometimes good people made bad choices when they felt trapped. Their voice carried compassion, not excuse, but understanding. Keanu felt respect grow deeper. This person did not rush to judgment, even when hurt. Alexandra waited near the doorway, watching the street. She saw a car slow down across the road, then stop. It was the same car from earlier, or at least it felt like it. Her body tensed slightly. She did not panic. She trusted her awareness. She stepped a little closer to the door and looked carefully. The driver stayed inside. The engine hummed. Alexandra turned her head toward the hallway and caught Keanu's eye. She did not speak. She only raised her eyebrows slightly, a signal they both understood. Something outside was not finished yet. Keanu saw it and nodded once, subtle. Inside, Myra asked what they should do next. Call someone, confront the person later, lock everything down. The questions came fast. Keanu took a breath. He did not want to control the situation. He wanted to support it. He said the priority was safety and dignity. He said confrontation without clarity could harm the center more than help. He suggested securing what they could tonight and addressing the issue in daylight with care. The older volunteer agreed. They said shame could push people further away. They said the goal was not punishment but repair. Myra looked torn, but she trusted their experience. She nodded. The tension eased slightly, but it did not disappear. Then a knock sounded at the door. It was not loud, but it was firm. Alexandra froze for a split second, then stepped forward. She opened the door just enough to speak. A man stood there, nervous, eyes darting. He said he worked at the shop nearby. He said he thought he should mention something. He said he saw someone leave the center earlier looking upset, carrying an envelope, and get into the car that was still across the street. The words landed hard. Alexandra thanked him calmly and closed the door gently. She turned toward Keanu, her face serious but composed. Keanu felt his pulse quicken. The night was tightening its grip. The person who took the envelope might still be nearby. The situation was no longer only about trust. It was about what happened next. Myra heard the exchange and felt panic rise. She asked if they should call the police. The older volunteer closed their eyes briefly, then opened them with resolve. They said calling authorities might escalate things and scare the person into running or doing something worse. They said sometimes a calm human approach worked better than force. Keanu felt the weight of choice settle on him again. He was standing at a crossroads he had not planned for when the evening began. He looked at Alexandra, then at Myra, then at the older volunteer. He felt the echo of that past kindness, the calm voice from years ago. He realized this moment was asking him to offer the same thing back, not just in memory, but in action. Keanu said he could try to speak to the person, quietly, respectfully. He said not as someone important, not as an authority, just as a human being. Alexandra's eyes widened slightly. She trusted his heart, but she knew the risk. She nodded anyway because she believed in his judgment. The older volunteer looked at Keanu closely. They asked if he was sure. Keanu answered honestly. He said he was not sure, but he said he knew that fear rarely healed anything. He said kindness sometimes opened doors that force never could. Outside, the car engine grew louder, like it was about to move. The sound of the engine outside felt like a ticking clock. Not loud, not threatening, just steady, reminding everyone that time was moving whether they were ready or not. Keanu felt his breath deepen as he stepped toward the door. His mind was clear in a quiet way, like a lake after the wind settles. Alexandra watched him with a mix of concern and trust, knowing he was choosing presence over fear. Keanu opened the door slowly and stepped onto the sidewalk. The night air wrapped around him, cool and grounding. The car across the street idled with its lights on low. He did not walk toward it right away. He stood where he was, visible but non-confrontational, his posture open, his hands relaxed at his sides. He wanted to be seen as a person, not a threat. Inside the building, Myra watched from a distance, her hands clasped tightly. The older volunteer stood near the hallway entrance, their eyes closed for a moment, as if silently hoping the night would soften. Alexandra remained near the doorway, ready but calm, her attention moving between Keanu and the car. Keanu took a few steps forward, slow and deliberate. He stopped at a respectful distance from the car and spoke in a steady voice. He said hello. He said he was not there to accuse anyone. He said he only wanted to talk for a minute. The car did not move. The engine continued its low hum. After a long pause, the driver's side window rolled down halfway. A face appeared, tense and tired, eyes rimmed with red. The person looked younger than Keanu expected, their shoulders tight, their jaw clenched like they were holding back words or tears. They did not speak at first. They waited like someone bracing for judgment. Keanu spoke again, gently. He said the center meant a lot to many people. He said mistakes could happen, especially when life felt heavy. He said what mattered was what came next. The words were simple, but they carried respect. He was not performing kindness. He was offering it. The person swallowed hard. Their voice came out rough when they finally spoke. They said they did not plan to take anything. They said they were helping out earlier, feeling overwhelmed, thinking about bills, about a sick parent, about nights without sleep. They said the envelope felt like a solution for one desperate moment. They said they hated themselves the second they put it in their pocket. Keanu listened without interrupting. He felt the familiar ache of seeing someone caught between need and values. He remembered that feeling too well. He did not excuse the action, but he saw the human behind it. He asked one quiet question. He asked if the envelope was still there. The person nodded slowly and reached into the passenger seat. They pulled out a plain envelope, slightly bent. Their hands shook as they held it up. They said they had been sitting there for 10 minutes, unable to drive away. They said they were scared to go back inside, scared to face Myra, scared to disappoint the older volunteer who had always treated them with patience. Keanu felt a wave of relief, but he did not show it too quickly. He said thank you for stopping. He said thank you for being honest. He asked if they would be willing to return it themselves or if they wanted help. The person hesitated, then said they did not think they could walk back in alone. Keanu nodded. He said he would walk with them, not in front, not behind, just beside. The person turned off the engine and stepped out of the car, shoulders slumped, eyes down. Together they crossed the street slowly. Alexandra opened the door wider, her expression calm and welcoming, not shocked, not cold. Inside, the air felt heavy but expectant. Myra saw the envelope in the person's hands and pressed her lips together, relief and frustration mixing in her face. The older volunteer stepped forward, their posture gentle. They did not scold. They did not lecture. They only said the person's name softly. The person broke down then, not loudly but deeply. They apologized again and again, their words tumbling out with tears. They said they were ashamed. They said they did not want to hurt the center. They said they did not know how to ask for help. The room stayed quiet, allowing the emotion to exist without being rushed away. The older volunteer placed a hand lightly on the person's shoulder. Their voice was calm, steady, the same voice Keanu remembered from years ago. They said needing help did not make someone bad. They said taking without asking was wrong, but it did not erase who the person was. They said the center existed because people struggled, not because people were perfect. Myra took a slow breath and nodded. She said the envelope would go back where it belonged. She said they would talk later in daylight about support and boundaries. She said trust could be rebuilt if honesty stayed present. The person nodded, tears still falling, but their shoulders eased slightly, like a weight had shifted. Keanu watched the exchange quietly. This was the emotional heart of the night, not the return of the envelope, but the way dignity was preserved on all sides. No voices were raised. No threats were made. Kindness did not erase responsibility, but it softened its edges. Alexandra felt her chest warm as she observed Keanu step back, allowing the center's people to lead their own healing. She admired how he knew when to act and when to disappear. She knew this was why his presence carried weight without force. The older volunteer turned toward Keanu then, their eyes finally meeting his fully in the light. Recognition passed between them, clear and unmistakable. They smiled softly and said his name, not surprised, not impressed, just aware. They said they remembered that night from years ago. They said they remembered offering water and a chair to a quiet man who looked like he needed peace more than words. Keanu felt his eyes sting. He nodded, unable to speak for a moment. He said thank you finally, the words carrying years of meaning. He said that moment had stayed with him. He said it had reminded him of who he wanted to be when life felt heavy. The older volunteer listened with humility, as if they had simply done what anyone should. The twist settled gently into truth. The night was not only about returning kindness to the past. It was about allowing kindness to move forward through mistakes, through fear, through quiet courage. The community center felt different now, lighter, as if it had exhaled. Myra suggested they all sit for a moment. Chairs were pulled out. The envelope was placed back in the box. Tea was offered. No one rushed to end the night. Keanu sat quietly, Alexandra beside him, feeling a sense of completion he had not expected so soon. Yet beneath that calm, another realization formed. Keanu looked at the paper bag he had brought, still unopened, still waiting. He understood now that its purpose might change. The gift he thought he came to give might not be the one the night required. The older volunteer noticed his gaze and smiled knowingly. They said sometimes the greatest support was not what you planned, but what you were willing to adapt. Keanu nodded slowly, sensing that the evening was not finished shaping him yet. Outside, the streetlights hummed steadily, and the city moved on, unaware of the quiet transformation happening in a small building on a quiet street. But Keanu felt it deeply. Something had closed and something else was opening. The room felt warmer after the tension passed, not because the air changed, but because people did. Keanu sat back in the chair, his hands resting loosely in his lap, listening to the soft sounds of cups being set down and chairs adjusting. The community center no longer felt like a place holding its breath. It felt like a place that had survived another difficult night and chosen care over fear. Alexandra watched Keanu quietly. She saw the way his shoulders eased, but she also sensed something else moving inside him. This evening had already given him closure, yet it was also asking more from him. Not in a loud way, but in the quiet language of responsibility. She knew him well enough to recognize that look. It was the look he carried when he felt called to act with depth, not impulse. Myra returned with tea for everyone. She handed a cup to the person who had taken the envelope first. Their hands were steadier now, their breathing slower. Shame had not disappeared, but it was no longer crushing. It had softened into reflection. They whispered thank you to Myra, then to the older volunteer, then finally to Keanu, their voice barely audible. Keanu met their eyes and nodded gently, offering reassurance without words. The older volunteer settled into a chair across from Keanu. Up close, their face showed years of quiet service, fine lines shaped by both fatigue and compassion. They looked at Keanu with curiosity, not about who he was in the world, but about who he had become since that night long ago. They asked him how he had been carrying that moment all these years. Keanu thought carefully before answering. He said that moment had reminded him that dignity could arrive in small gestures. He said when life overwhelmed him later, he often remembered that someone once saw him without asking for anything back. He said it helped him choose patience when he could have chosen distance. The older volunteer listened, their expression humble, almost surprised that something so ordinary had left such a mark. The conversation drifted naturally. Stories of the center emerged of people helped quietly, of volunteers who came and went, of nights when nothing dramatic happened and yet everything mattered. Alexandra listened with respect, feeling honored to witness a space where humanity unfolded without performance. She noticed how Keanu did not dominate the room. He spoke when invited, listened more than he talked, and allowed others to feel valued. Eventually, Myra glanced at the clock and sighed softly. She said it had been a long night, and tomorrow would bring its own challenges. The person who had taken the envelope nodded, understanding they would need to have a longer conversation later. They stood, looking uncertain again, but the older volunteer reassured them that they would face it together, with honesty and boundaries. As people began to prepare to leave, Keanu reached for the paper bag at his feet. The movement caught the older volunteer's attention. They asked what it was. Keanu smiled faintly and said it was something he had planned to leave quietly before the night changed direction. He opened the bag and pulled out a small stack of envelopes, neatly arranged, along with a handwritten letter. He explained that the envelopes were meant for emergency supplies, groceries, transport vouchers, things the center could distribute without ceremony. He said the letter was not instructions, only gratitude, and permission to use the support in whatever way felt right. He emphasized that his name did not need to be attached. He said the work mattered more than the credit. Myra felt her eyes sting as she looked at the contents. She thanked him sincerely, but she also said something important. She said support like this helped, but what mattered just as much was consistency. She said one gift could ease a week, but relationships sustained years. Keanu nodded because he understood. He said he did not want this to be a single moment. He said he wanted to learn how to support without controlling, without creating dependence. The older volunteer smiled at that. They said that was the hardest balance to learn. They said many people wanted to help, but fewer were willing to listen long enough to help well. They said the center needed allies who respected its rhythm. Keanu said he was willing to learn that rhythm slowly. Alexandra felt pride swell in her chest, not loud but steady. This was the kind of partnership she believed in, where action followed listening, and kindness adapted rather than imposed. She placed her hand lightly over Keanu's for a moment, grounding him, reminding him that he did not carry this alone. The emotional weight of the night reached a quiet peak. There was no applause, no dramatic closure, just a shared understanding that something meaningful had occurred. Keanu stood and thanked everyone again, not repeatedly, not excessively, but with sincerity. The older volunteer stood as well and looked at him closely. They said something that surprised Keanu. They said they had been thinking about leaving the center. They said years of service had taken a toll and they were tired. They said tonight reminded them why they stayed, but also why transition mattered. They said the center needed support to prepare for change, not just survival. The words landed gently but deeply. Keanu realized the night was not only about his past or this single conflict. It was about the future of a place built on fragile dedication. He asked what kind of support would help most. The older volunteer said mentorship for younger volunteers, sustainable funding, and people willing to protect the culture of respect even when pressure rose. Keanu listened carefully. He did not promise immediately. He said he needed to think, to plan responsibly. But he also said he felt a responsibility now, not from obligation, but from alignment. The older volunteer nodded, satisfied with that answer. They did not want quick fixes. They wanted thoughtful commitment. As Keanu and Alexandra prepared to leave, the person who had taken the envelope approached again. Their eyes were clearer now, steadier. They apologized one last time, not desperately, but sincerely. Keanu responded with respect. He said accountability and honesty were strong choices. He said asking for help was not weakness. The person nodded, absorbing the words slowly. Outside, the night felt calmer. The street was quiet again, but it no longer felt heavy. Keanu and Alexandra walked side by side, their pace slow. Neither spoke at first. They let the silence carry the meaning of what had just happened. After a while, Alexandra spoke softly. She said the night had changed shape many times. She said it started as a return, became a test, and ended as an opening. Keanu smiled gently. He said he had come to give thanks, but he was leaving with responsibility. He said it felt right, even if it felt heavy. Alexandra nodded. She said responsibility rooted in respect did not drain people. It anchored them. Her words settled into Keanu's chest like truth. He felt the pull of what came next, not clearly but strongly. Something was forming, a commitment that would require patience, discretion, and humility. As they reached the corner where their paths would turn toward home, Keanu paused. He looked back once, toward the community center, its lights now dim again. He felt a quiet certainty that this was not the end of the story. The kindness that had once saved him had now asked him to help protect it, not as a hero, but as a steward. But even as that resolve formed, another question rose beneath it. How could he help without being seen? How could he support without changing the soul of the place? The answers were not clear yet. The suspense remained, not dramatic, but meaningful. The night had given him purpose, but it had not given him a plan. The morning light arrived gently, as if it knew the night before had been heavy. Keanu stood by the window of his apartment, watching the city wake without urgency. Cars moved slowly. A bird rested on a wire. The world did not know what had shifted inside him, and that felt right. Some changes were meant to stay quiet. Alexandra moved through the space behind him, making tea, letting the day begin in its own time. Neither of them spoke at first. There was no need to rush meaning into words. The night at the community center still lived between them, not as tension, but as clarity. Keanu felt grounded in a way he had not felt for a long time. Purpose did that when it came from humility. Later that afternoon, Keanu returned alone to the community center. Not announced, not prepared for attention. He wore simple clothes and carried no bag this time. He wanted to listen more than give. Myra greeted him with a tired smile that carried relief. She said the person from the night before had come back in the morning on time, honest, ready to face consequences. She said the conversation had been hard but respectful. Boundaries were set. Support was offered. Dignity was preserved. Keanu felt a quiet sense of gratitude, not pride. Gratitude that kindness had held its shape even under pressure. The older volunteer arrived shortly after, moving slowly but steadily. They greeted Keanu like an old friend, not with excitement, but with warmth. They sat together in the same chairs from the night before. Keanu asked questions and listened carefully. He asked what the center needed to stay itself. Not bigger, not louder, just steadier. The older volunteer spoke about structure, about training younger volunteers to lead with respect. They spoke about burnout and how often the kindest people disappeared quietly when they felt unseen. They spoke about sustainability as an act of care. Keanu took mental notes not to control but to understand. He did not promise money. He did not promise solutions. He promised presence without interference. He said he would help connect the center with resources quietly, without names attached, without expectations. He said he would step back when needed. The older volunteer nodded because they knew promises meant more when they were measured. Over the next weeks, Keanu kept that promise. Support arrived in small, thoughtful ways: training materials, anonymous funding for emergency supplies, connections to counselors willing to volunteer time. No announcements were made. No photos were taken. The center remained what it was, just less fragile. The person who had taken the envelope stayed. They showed up early. They listened more. They accepted help with humility. Trust rebuilt slowly, the only way it ever truly did. Myra noticed the change in the atmosphere. The center felt safer, not because problems vanished, but because people felt held. Alexandra visited often, sometimes with Keanu, sometimes alone. She brought books, art supplies, conversations. She treated everyone the same, with curiosity and respect. People did not whisper about who she was, they spoke about how she listened. One evening, weeks later, the older volunteer told Keanu they were ready to step back. Not disappear, but rest. They said the center was stronger now. They said younger volunteers were ready to carry the work forward. Keanu felt the weight of that trust. He thanked them not as a benefactor, but as a student thanking a teacher. Before leaving that night, the older volunteer handed Keanu a small folded paper. They said they had kept it for years. Inside was a simple note written long ago. It said, "Thank you for sitting quietly. Thank you for trusting kindness." Keanu felt his throat tighten. He realized the note was the one he had written years ago, left behind without knowing it would be kept. The circle closed gently. On the walk home, Keanu and Alexandra moved slowly through the evening air, much like the night that started everything. The city felt familiar but different, not changed, understood. Keanu told her about the note. Alexandra smiled softly. She said some kindness returned not as applause, but as peace. Keanu nodded. He said he once thought meaning came from big moments. He said now he believed it lived in ordinary evenings, in choices made quietly and respect offered without demand. Alexandra agreed. She said kindness that asked nothing often shaped everything. They stopped at the same corner where the story had first turned. The light was steady, the street calm, nothing dramatic marked the moment, and yet Keanu felt complete, not finished but aligned. The ordinary evening had become a lesson carried forward, not a story to tell loudly but a way to live.